Welcome to another edition of Strange New Pod. I'm your acting captain and host, MC Frodis, alongside the best bridge crew this side of a Bajor and wormhole. Fleet Admiral Julian is here, letting me take command so he can find the lost city of Valhalla.
Headaches and all. I have the headaches. I got the shivers.
Yeah.
It's all just it's all just like in the episode. It's great. It's awesome.
Commander Hawk is here, having taught the prophets how to play hockey.
You think they'd understand?
Oh, I mean, like the weather here is appropriate for it. So
They don't even get baseball. I think hockey, the puck, like offside alone, they're not gonna understand.
Why do they keep hitting each other?
they're adversarial.
It's not linear.
So it sounds like we're doing pretty good, other than Julian feeling a bit,
Listen,
Under
the
the weather,
visions.
so-
Dr. Bashir won't even give me the good meds, so I'm screwed. It's okay. I'm fine. I'm just sweating through my shirt. We're good. Happy.
Yeah.
We'll get through this.
We will.
So Rear Admiral Eric is off this week. He is trapped in a vision of himself as a 1950s sci-fi writer. And Captain Giraffe is searching for the orb of deception and espionage for the Tal Shiar.
One of these episodes was really good and Romulan heavy. The one with Kira's blockade is just
that
dope.
was great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this week, in the next installment of the Best of Species series, we're exploring one of the most complex species, the wormhole aliens, aka the Prophets from Star Trek Deep Space Nine. This may be one of our most ambitious deep dives yet, with the Prophets being like such an integral part of the plot. I mean, like, Julian was commenting on how thick the outline was.
The
Of course, that
camera
might just
doesn't
be
do
me.
it justice. It's a thick boy.
Look at
To which
how
I
many
also said
trees
off
live their
mic.
life for this episode.
I also said to MC off mic, I think every time we've done a DS9 episode, the outline's been a thick boy, which just goes along with the
It's
series.
Deep Space Nine,
it's
yeah.
Deep Space Nine.
But before we get into it, Julian, we need to thank our amazing patron collective at the Ready Room level and above.
Yeah, sure. Make the sick guy read the names. Love it.
Well, you're making me do everything else.
I know, that's fair. That's absolutely fair. A big thank you to Simon Stager, Jeff Reeve, Mariah Gossett, Tallulah, Jen Stein, Tina Alexander, Joe Saprito, Noe Santos, Kang Hui, Takako Degumo, Fernanda Nogales, SMK, Laura Linderman, Colin Davidson, Jesco, Michael Graham, Emily and Travis, Gildara, Cassie, Going Gaga for Grappling Greatness. I'm sorry I did not look at the updates if they were updated names in there. I will get them for next week. Maggie Light, Tyrannokilicus, Wayne Ritz, Skonavark, Sean, Jay Howard, Anna Yurdadon, Mehalani Uchiyama, Matt Harker, Joshua Lewis, Davey Willett, I know he's in the chat, Tara Pollen, Slope74, Rude Parakeet, Joshua Miller, Adam Sanders, Aris Benjian, Lanky Guy, Aaron Walke, Carl Angoli. By the way, going back to Aaron Walke real quick, Star Trek Prodigy premieres on Netflix on December 25th. Binge the whole thing. Cara Angoli, Michael Kwan, TJ, Mayer, Caitlin, Elizabeth Dean, Jim McMahon, changing my name to Trip Up Julian, Sedano 317, Puka Hair, 3 Fries Short, Cat Tippe, Tripping the Read Alert over a pineapple, Sean Manning, Congressional Baseball Fan, Chris Waterman, RHCB, and Martin Simpson. Y'all fucking rock. Thank you.
And as always, a big thanks to our amazing executive producers, Simon Stager, Commander Chris, the Chief, Ernesto Castagna, Chris Waterman, and Tara Pollen.
Woo woo.
So I think we got a little bit of news to go over. So first, Julian,
Yes.
end of the year show.
End of the year. I think last year we didn't do an end of year show because everything like landed on weird days, or I'm just forgetting. But this year, actually, the end of the year happens like on a show day, right? It's the 28th, so it's right in between Christmas and New Year. So on the 28th, we're gonna do an awesome end of year show. We're gonna be doing, fingers crossed, 2 giveaways. So that's one big announcement out there. I'm not going to say what they are yet in case they don't ship, but I got charged for one of them. So good news. What's going to be cool about that is last year, kind of spur of the moment, we decided to just as a crew decide and put on Twitter like what our favorite series was of the year and what our favorite episode is of the year. And we're going to expand upon that for the collective and excuse me. And kind of the Trek fandom as a whole. We're going to do polls and see what your favorite series was for the year, favorite episode. I think for you guys, at least, we'll expand it to favorite characters. That's actually something we're going to talk with our executive producers about over the weekend, and hopefully have those polls ready for you to vote on, and they'll go through the next few weeks as we get to the end of December for our end of year episode. So stay tuned for that. It's going to be a lot of fun. Like I said, 2 giveaways, shenanigans. We might even do like a happy hour before or after to get in like the holiday spirit, because I feel like you have to.
Sounds like a good idea.
I think it's just going to be a really fun episode. It's going to be really laid back and super stoked for it. So that's what's going on. Stay tuned for the awards.
And for those of you who are in the Los Angeles area, Giraffe is going to be at Los Angeles Comic-Con tomorrow until Sunday. So December 1st to 3rd. Keep an eye out for her there. I believe she's going to be rocking a Commodore O costume one of the days. So obviously go say hi to her. Giraffe always likes to say hi to people from the collective. And I think we have heroes and villains to talk about.
We do.
I'm
I'm
actually wearing a heroes and villains shirt today.
I think all 3 of us
I think we all
are prepared this week.
Rocking
Yeah.
my jersey. It's amazing.
You could have put Trials and Tribulations on this list too, MC, because that's a profity episode as well.
There's so much stuff.
So I decided to wear the Constitution shirt from Heroes and Villains because they visit, Kirk and the Enterprise during the Tribble incident. So yeah, Heroes and Villains, 20% off your first order. They actually just had an amazing Black Friday, Cyber Monday deal. I think like the whole site was up to 50% off. Unfortunately, like the thing that I wanted was sold out, which is a good sign. But yeah, good.
That sucks for you.
Yeah, it sucks for me, but not everybody else who got it. So, great Star Trek tees, great Star Trek hoodie, great dude. MC, how dope was that X-Men booth at Comic-Con?
The X-Men booth
I can't
was
stop
so
talking
good.
about it.
Yeah, no, get their X-Men stuff. Support X-Men right now because something awesome just happened in X-Men comics and I need it supported.
Indeed.
And their stuff is just dope.
Yep. 20% off using our code STRANGE, and that's off your first order.
Okay, so we do have a strange new loop for this week.
Ooh, do we?
You do. So the Prophets are unique in that they only ever appeared on Deep Space Nine. What other series would you like them to appear in, and which character should they interact with, and why? Julian?
MC's gonna hate my answer. She's gonna hate it. She's gonna be so mad. I'm gonna be one of the fanboys for a second that are ruling the internet right now, but it's because I want the show and I can't help myself. Star Trek Legacy. If you're gonna do a continuation, and we've talked about this on the podcast, if you're gonna do a Star Trek Legacy show, it can't just be TNG, right? It's got to have TNG characters. It's got to have Deep Space Nine characters, and it has to have Voyager characters. We've gotten some Voyager love from Lower Decks. We've gotten some Deep Space Nine love from Lower Decks, but I think that you need to do an arc that at least hints at the current arc in the comics that's happening with Sisko's return, right? Like, we know that Avery Brooks is never going to return to the screen, right? But Sirach Lofton can, right? They can interact with Jake. They can interact with Sisko's daughter, who we've yet to meet, except in the comics. These are characters.
And by the time of Legacy, they'd be be a decent age.
Yeah. So these are stories that still need to be told, and the Prophets are still a major part of the Star Trek universe. And if we've gotten the changelings in Picard, I don't see the Prophets being very far off. If you're doing, especially like I've talked about this before, if you're going to do Legacy, it's got to be Expanse style. You have to follow all the different factions and all the different shows because it's the legacy of the TNG era. So Prophets can't be far off if that show gets greenlit. So that's my answer. Sorry,
I'm not mad at that. I would have been a lot madder if you had said, like, what's his name? Picard's kid.
Oh, yeah, no. Fuck him. No, I love him. Fuck Nepo, baby.
But yeah, like Jake Sisko, like who is also a nepo baby, but at least has a reason.
Yeah,
to
but
talk
he's
to
a
the
nepo
prophet.
baby
Yeah,
that went
he's-
through some shit, right? I mean, I guess
Yeah.
Jake found his own path. I will
Jack went
defend.
through a lot of shit too. Let's be fair, but like
Mm.
Jake's lost his mom. His dad joined the Prophets. Obviously, we're going to talk about that. Like, kids had it rough. Oh yeah, he went through fucking space and time to try and save his dad.
Oh yeah, that was a crazy episode.
I rest my case.
Oh Lord.
Hawk, what about you?
Oh, this is an easy one for me. Have them appear in Lower Decks, have them interact with Shax, because I really want to see that moment in that with Shax interacting with the prophets, and they ask Shax, why do you exist here?
Oh, I love that, Hawk.
All right.
Oh man.
Oh,
See, I was gonna say Lower Decks too.
Yeah.
I was thinking Boimler though. I think that Boimler and the Prophets would be fun.
That would be amusing.
I mean, I have
like
no
that.
idea what would happen, but
Do you know
Boimler
he'd get
trying
taken? He'd get taken into their realm, and he'd do an immediate Boimler scream, right? He'd probably fanboy
yeah.
right after.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I picture it being a lot like Prophet motives, which we're going to be talking about a little bit, but kind of like the one time like the Prophets are like not like seen like super seriously. Like it would be nice if that would happen again.
Yeah. I want to read Joe's answer in the chat, Admiral Frontis Frontier, because it was actually an answer I was going to say before I said Legacy. I was thinking about this today. Discovery and Michael Burnham.
Yes.
Yes.
I'm here for it.
I think it's a great answer, and I would be fully on board with that. So we have some others. Michael Kwan wrote TOS Kirk, Voyager, Harry Kim. If anyone needs the help of the Prophets, it's Harry.
Yeah.
To get that extra pip.
Yeah. Am I missing any? Jake was a vessel for the Prophets. Yeah.
Jet Reno and the Prophets from
That's
Matt
from Matt Harker.
That would be interesting. I did have a wild thought, and I've talked about this before about Mbenga and the Prophets, because I entirely believe that Deborah was actually a prophet, and that's
Ooh,
why it's all
interesting.
tied to it's tied to Benny Russell and with the Elysian Kingdom.
Oh, yeah, that's really good too. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yep. Nice.
yeah, I think there's a lot of different things. The Prophets are so, like I said, they've only been used in Deep Space Nine, so there could be some fun ways to see them. I think the only other time they've been, I mean, maybe in the novels, but I'm gonna bring up Kelvin verse because Julian already made a tweet about it. But they did
what the hell is going on?
They did an arc in the Kelvin comics where they go to the future on Deep Space Nine and they interact with the Prophets, and it's actually the Prophets interacting with Q.
I mean, I feel like the Prophets have had to have interacted with Q before, right? Like you don't be like those kind of beings and not be aware of each other's existence.
Well, there's got to be some sort of like omniscient like council where it's just like, okay, you stay in this territory, we'll stay in here. Like, we'll mess with Sisko. You can't mess with Sisko anymore. You stay with Picard. Picard and Janeway is yours. Don't do that thing with Sisko again. He's just gonna punch you out again.
I will say, if we're talking about like in literature and in the comics, I really do like what Colin and Jackson have done with the ongoing Star Trek comic with Sisko and the Prophets and him being back. It could have been really bad, and there's points where it's cheese, but like for the most part, it's really good, and it's tying up some really good. And I'm very far behind after the Red War, but it ties up some good DS9 loose ends, and the Prophets are very much a part of it. So it's a really good read if you have. I think the first volume's out now, so you can get that.
Joe says he wants a round table with Q, the Prophets, and the Koala. The Koala is one of the Prophets and one of the Q. The Koala is all.
I'd pay for that TED Talk. Yep.
So let's move on to talking about some of the Prophets on Deep Space Nine.
Oh my!
And
child.
I have some behind the scenes stuff about the prophets here. So out of all of the best of species we've done, I do think that this is the most difficult, because the prophets are in basically every single episode of Deep Space Nine, except not. It's so hard because they're like mentioned all the time. But when you do actually get an episode about the prophets, they appear in like one scene. So coming up with the list, very hard. But this was apparently by design, because Ronald D. Moore said in 1997 that if they appear too often, they'll become too pedestrian. Fair enough.
Fair. I think that's a
true.
fair assessment.
Yeah.
It's like, the X-Files kind of use that model too, in that, or like how many episodes they did a year in that, like the whole alien conspiracy thing in that.
Mm-hmm. How many myth arc they can do.
Yeah, exactly. If you do it too much, just becomes boring, and they would have lost their viewership.
Yeah. And of course, with the prophets also came the Bajoran religion. Well, I guess the Bajoran religion did come before, because we did have Rolaren. But it was controversial because Gene's vision, and Gene was very famously said, for most people, religion is nothing more than a substitute for a malfunctioning brain. But Michael Piller, ended up saying that he thinks that Roddenberry would have actually liked it, because they're not actually changing the rules of Star Trek. They're just exploring how another alien race and what they might consider important is viewed through humans. And it's kind of like into that whole science, particularly advanced, is indistinguishable from magic. They're wormhole aliens, they're prophets. That becomes a whole plot.
I'll say that I think that Michael Piller is wrong. I think Gene would have hated it, but I also think that Gene's wrong, right? Like,
well, yeah.
I think that religion, and as someone who is culturally Jewish but not spiritually Jewish, like I don't believe in God. I love talking about religion, and I love studying religion, and I think Star Trek missed the ball, right? Like they missed being able to tell those stories more because of Gene. And I think Gene was already dead, correct me if I'm wrong, when Ro was introduced. So started kind of like sneaking it in there. I don't think that Gene, I think that Gene, I think Gene, people talk about Gene rolling in his grave over things, and they're wrong. The things that they think he's rolling in his grave about, he's not. If he was going to roll in his grave about something, I think it would be Deep Space Nine. But that's because he was short-sighted, right? Not saying, I don't want to talk too much shit about Gene, because without Gene we don't have Star Trek, but we know what Gene's vision was for it, and this would not have been his cup of tea. But it's very good that Ira and Ron Moore and that whole team went this route.
It's true. I mean, it was a subject they didn't really tap in, and when they did kind of like explore like anything related to religion, like pre Deep Space Nine, it was usually a story involving like false idols and that, Landru, or like when Picard was mistaken by the Proto Vulcans as a god,
or the Greek gods in TOS.
Exactly.
And Michael Kwan brings up a really good point. This is really true. The attitude of the Starfleet admirals above Ben match Gene's view of religion, right? They're often very dismissive of the Bajoran religion and dismissive of him being the emissary. So, great point.
Okay, and despite 7 seasons of Deep Space Nine dealing with the prophets, we never actually get an answer as to where they came from or how they created the wormhole, if they actually did. And this was by design, because 1, you can't always have a scientific answer for things, and 2, it maintains the mystical quality of them, because even if they're wormhole aliens, they're prophets, and we want them to be, prophets. So can't explain them. So we're going to be getting into the episodes. We have several important prophet episodes to discuss, and best to start with the beginning, because one of the first things that happens in Deep Space Nine is the introduction of the prophets in Emissary. So, but before we're introduced to them, we're introduced to the superior Kai, and that's Opaka. And she introduces Sisko to the orbs and hints at his importance as part of the Bajoran religion. with his role as the emissary. What Sisko goes through is almost magical, kind of re-experiencing his first meeting with Jennifer. And we see him and Jadzia examining the orb with technology. And this all kind of ties to the Michael Pillar quote that I mentioned above, this exploration of science versus faith with the prophets.
Yeah.
Which I guess we already talked about.
No, we did, but it's still really cool because the episode wastes no time, right? Like getting us into it, right? He's on board. He kind of looks at the Bajorn temple when he walks by it. He doesn't go in, meets Opaka. Like they didn't waste any time with it. So I really appreciated that about the pilot.
I just realized I did not set an order.
That's okay. There's only two of us, so we'll cut each other off a bunch. It's
fine.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird because looking back at it now, and as you mentioned, that Sisko paid no mind to the temple and that, and it's like I'm kind of realizing that the journey of Sisko throughout the series was almost like Saul becoming Paul and that from the New Testament, but it's also so different in that because really in religion and that your deities are not supposed to actively interact with you in any level in that. And this is the whole thing about the a leap of faith, but you have these gods and that who do make contact, and when their presence is gone and that the Bajoran people knew that they were close to them, right?
But that even comes up in Deep Space Nine. I want to say it's In the Hands of the Prophets. Opaka says to then Vedic Win that the reason why Sisko is chosen as the emissary is because one shouldn't look into the eyes of their own gods. So, Sisko is not a part of the Bajoran religion outside of it.
Which is interesting on its own foot again, because we later find out that he is of Bajor, right? It's
that is
dynamic.
That's different.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the science versus faith and Sisko not going into the temple, it all ties to this episode. Sisko starting off as a broken man, he does just completely lost, stuck in being re-traumatized by Wolf 359. And it's only through his interaction with the prophets that he's able to actually move past to that and kind of move on to the next thing.
And it's weird. Did they mean to help him or that, or were they just kind of confused by when they experienced his psyche and that? It's because for them, they found he, all his memory was tied to one location and one event, and that the death of Jennifer and escaping and Wolf 359, but subconsciously still always being there. And it's asking him the question, why do you exist here? He wasn't even looking to be, he wasn't looking for religion.
He wasn't looking for anything at that point, right? He was going to retire.
Yeah.
And I don't think the prophets were looking for anything, because I don't think they understood what was going on, which actually, brings up the next point, when actually Sisko does meet the prophets, because they're these incorporeal beings that are projected into the minds of corporeal beings, and they take the forms of people that they know. And Sisko teaches the prophets about corporeal linear time. And as you mentioned, the prophets bring up that Sisko is always taking them back to Wolf 359, and they don't understand how Sisko can be talking about how linear time and how this works for corporeal beings, yet he still keeps on coming back here. And it's what makes Sisko, because at this point, he's not the captain, but he's a broken man, and it's only through this that he becomes the emissary, that he does embrace his role as the captain. And I think that even with Jake, that he's able to move on to be a proper father to Jake.
Yeah. We were talking in the chat about these episodes a lot, all kind of just remembering and realizing how fucking good this show is. And I remember, MC, you said that you kind of felt like Avery was phoning it in a little bit. I was watching it, I think, after you said that, and while I was watching, I'm like, I could see how it could be interpreted that way, but it's actually a great way to play Sisko during this point because he was phoning it in, right? He has no desire to be there. He wants to retire. He tells Picard, like, I'm probably not staying, like, find me a replacement. I will get this place operational and then I'm out. Then to just immediately go through all this and see Jennifer again, right, in both their first meeting and dying during Wolf 359. The way that his demeanor changes from when he first steps foot on Deep Space Nine to when he's back in ops and in his office with Picard and being like, don't find a replacement. I'm very much where I need to be. I think he actually did a really good job with this episode. And I do think that Emissary is one of the stronger openings. I love that. And we really haven't gotten it since maybe you could say in Discovery season 2 with Michael being the Red Angel, but still, like, Ben being the captain or commander / captain of Deep Space Nine and being the emissary of the prophets is just something that we'll never get in Star Trek again. And I love that they did this with his character because every single time, and we're going to obviously talk about this so much, but every single time that he got the scenes to chew on when it came to the prophets and struggling with his role as the emissary, like Avery Brooks just like he ate for days because he did so well with it. So I love that they did this.
Yeah. And I mean, like they didn't do it before, like with Kirk and Picard, they were the captain and that's all they were. And when you get to Sisko, suddenly he's the emissary, and through his role as the emissary, he's able to finally like embrace all of these other roles. He is the most connected of every single captain. Like they're all like, I'm just the chair, and Sisko's like, no, I'm gonna make you a Creole dinner.
Yeah, like I agree with Julian. There were some moments in that, like in the performance in the pilot episode, now when like an actor is really trying to shake out the character and that, and like find their way into it, and that. First up, his first meeting with Picard, and that where he can just barely keep
he wants to punch him in the face like he does.
So much you can see the look, but he's just hanging on and keeping everything civil and respectful, and that moment where his like trauma begins to break down, and that when he's like back in Wolf 359 and like the tears are coming down, and that like those were big splashy tears and that were coming down his face, and that like he really like dove into that scene, and like I said, by the end of the episode, and that I think like you could see like as an actor he had found his footing in the character, and that, and I think was ready to move forward with it.
I don't want to be here. Like, Oh,
yeah, it is, I definitely think, one of the best pilots, and it's the only pilot I think that you can watch the pilot and the finale and see where they were going. So the next episode we're talking about is such a weird one to talk about. I mean, I love it. It's one of my favorites, but it's Prophet Motive. And I just briefly wanted to talk about it because it's not like super profity. It's more, it's very profity because it's Ferengis.
Profity.
And that makes it unique because it's the Grand Nagus goes to visit the prophets to get a leg up on Ferengi business, but the prophets are so offended by Zek's adversarial nature, they de-evolve him into a primitive version of a Ferengi from before they had economics. And it's just so great because this is like the only episode where the prophets are not dealing with Sisko or the Bajoran religion. So I really wanted to talk about the prophets being seen in this completely foreign space.
The only thing that I want to say about this episode is that the prophets are the second godlike species that we've seen in the TNG era of Star Trek who've just been like fed up and excuse me, fed up and just done with the Ferengi and want to yeet the hell out of them away, right? The dude in season 1 where we first see the whips, what's his name? I can't. The guy. The guy.
I know, I'm trying to remember his name.
And they're all that episode has so many problems, but still, he's just like, do you want me to like make them go away forever? And Riker's like, no, don't do that. Don't do that.
They would learn nothing.
Yeah. And here are the prophets like, what the like, not that the prophets swear, but like they're like, what the fuck? Like, no, no. Like the rewritten rules of acquisition are just brilliant. I love this. It's so stupid, but so good. I adored it.
And it shows just how good a businessman Quark is, because he's able to negotiate with the prophets.
Who says they could do that, right?
Same. I love this episode, and it is genuinely a great prophet episode. Not because they do interact with the species who really, like, with the Bajorans, and that the Bajorans seem to be like they're adopted like children. They I don't, for some reason or other, in that they feel some kinship and like protectiveness over this people, even though they don't interfere in that, when they really needed it, aka the occupation. But then they're confronted by the Ferengi, and as I said, they finally, it's like their whole attitude and outlook on life offensive. But we also learned that at some point, like the Ferengis, did not think like this, and that they were actually probably pretty giving people amongst each other. And I'm trying to imagine that, that 2001 Space Odyssey moment in the history of Ferenginon, and that, where like, instead of like, picking up a bone club, they probably found a piece of latinum and everything changed.
Yeah.
I really, we got to learn a little bit more about Ferengis too, but just the fact that they could, they decided to just edit, his personality, and that is, it shows off their power, for one thing. I don't know where I'm going with this, but
that's okay.
I absolutely thought this was a vital piece of of the story of the prophets, to show that.
And well, it's always good to get something like the prophets outside of their usual, because they do usually stick to the whole, we're dealing with the Sisko thing, and this really shows what their nature is, to be able to like take them out of their natural element. So
also, sorry, I remember what I was going to say. That it's a great Quark episode in that, because
it really is.
For for like, as cravenly as we find, we always see the Ferengi portrayed in that, we know that Quark always broke those stereotypes and that, but like the fact that like, he has a weird sense of courageousness to him, right? Because he had to get this done, out of self-preservation, because as he said, like it was going to be him, Zek and Rom thrown from the top of the Great Tower of Commerce.
Yeah.
But at the same time, he has this weird sense of courageousness, and that he goes in and, as you said, negotiates with the prophets, and that, and like it should be something that's way above his pay grade, but like he still finds the argument and he still makes it. And I think this was another one of those character defining episodes for Quark.
I think that if Quark was just a little less greedy, he actually would have made a really good Grand Nagus. I think Rom's the right choice, right? But I think Quark could have been there. I think he could have done it. Just my 2 cents.
Anything? I don't know. I always, not to go on to the Ferengis, and we're talking about the prophets and that, but like, by the end of DS9, you can feel the winds of change like kind of sweeping through for the Ferengi culture, and that could not, because operating on a space station and being like, interacting with all these cultures, change was always going to come to Ferengi.
Yeah.
I mean, Rom ends up becoming the Grand Nagus, and he's the one who like unabashedly loves these prophet altered rules of acquisition, like without being altered at all. So like maybe the prophets were just like, showing the new direction, like early on
the stage, right?
Yeah. So I know Julian really wants to talk about this next episode, because we've talked several times about how this is one of our favorite episodes, but we're talking about Accession. And this episode really cements Sisko's position as the emissary. This is actually, the writers call it, I think, part 2 in the emissary trilogy. Because we saw him in the first few seasons, he was really hesitant to be in the role. And even in this episode, he's shaky. But here he truly takes the mantle, because we get a poet from like 200 years ago who comes through the wormhole and is like, I am the emissary. And Sisko originally is like, sure, like, I will let you take over.
Yeah.
But thoughts about Sisko actually kind of finally embracing the role of the emissary?
So many thoughts on this, and again, like, it's amazing how well you put this list together, MC, because all these episodes connect so well. We're going to
They
talk
really
about this
do.
more later on, but like, at this point, yes, he's grown as the emissary, but he's also gotten, I wouldn't say tired, but he's grown weary of the role, right?
Mhm.
And I don't think that's through any small part of Starfleet pressuring him, right? At this point, Starfleet is still very much like on track, trying to get Bajor into the Federation. We know they're super uncomfortable with Ben being in the role. And I think probably his friends, he has, a few friends who were admirals, were like, Ben, like, this is a very slippery slope, what you're doing. So I don't think, I mean, I do think that this plays a role of why he's a little bit weird at the beginning of this episode when they ask for his like the wedding blessing, right? And then this guy comes along saying he's the emissary, and he's like, okay, finally, I can just be the captain of this space station. I don't have to be the emissary of the prophets anymore. I could work towards the goal that I was sent here to complete, and that's bring Bajor into the Federation. So, as far as him taking the mantle by the end of this episode, it's amazing, right? Because we know it's what he's meant to be. Unfortunately, it comes at such a high cost. And this episode is so good for a variety of reasons. And like MC said, it's one of my favorite, probably top 3 episodes of Deep Space Nine. It's a lot harder to watch in the current climate that we live in today, because it's very reminiscent of things going on right now. So the way in which he really is able to take that mantle comes at a very high cost. But I appreciate it nonetheless. And we'll get to that.
Same. This is a really important episode in that. Yes, we do see the frustrations of it in that, because like I'm sure it's like there is something amazing about, being the emissary and being able to, directly interact with the prophets, and that being like the emissary, like, carries with it a lot of duties and that. And if you're the commander of the space station, who also has, like, to do, like, these ceremonies and that, not just that, but I mean, like, in a way, he has unwittingly taken on the role of a religious leader in that. And it's with that, it's like people come to him with their problems of spiritual matters and that. So that must be tiring. That's, to him at some point, the formalities and everything that go along with it and that. But given what was happening in that, when the emissary comes out and basically wants to reenact like a Bajoran case system in that from 200 years ago, and the fact that he missed out entirely on the occupation, which could not help but change like the culture of Bajor and that, like, in totality in that. So like Ben really had no choice, did he?
I'm wondering if part of Ben's problems with being the prophet might have to do with not feeling worthy of it, because they worship him. Like, they're, bless us, like, you are the emissary. And he's just like, I'm just like some Starfleet commander. Like, why are you
God, remember how quickly news spreads when him and Cassie decide to get married, and they're all of a sudden just throngs of people. Like, it's a huge deal. Like you said, they worship him. Sorry, MC, I cut you off.
No, it's okay, because like you said basically exactly what I would say. Like, I can't imagine like being like on, because I mean, he's almost he's not the Pope, because that's what Kai Wynn is. I mean, he's Space Jesus. He's literally Space Jesus.
He's Space Jesus.
Yes, he is.
Yep.
And that's how the Bajoran people treat him. And I mean, Jesus had problem being Earth Jesus, so
Yep.
you know, it's not surprising that Sisko would have problem being a space Jesus.
I mean, listen, I don't think it's hard to read like between the lines of where they were going writing the character, right? Like there's so many. I mean, there's so much connections to Jesus Christ with Ben Sisko. So, yeah.
So I already said that I love this episode, but one of my favorite things about it is that the prophets are pretty manipulative in it. Like, Sisko's hesitant about the role, and so they send somebody to force his hand, and it's like the worst person to actually like lead Bajor's religion, because he's not a bad guy, but Okorum, I think is his name, he's just so out of touch. Like you said, he hasn't been a part of the occupation. He still wants the caste system. And that's like the worst thing that Bajor could have now. And it's the one thing that could really kick Sisko into gear. So are we here for manipulative prophets manipulating Sisko into the right position?
I mean, I think it's I don't know if necessarily it's the prophets being manipulative in that. I think it's the way the writing of the episode kind of worked out in that, because like, you know, this is one of the problems with fourth dimensional beings, is that looking down on time, you know, because as they say, you know, as they see it, time is a flat circle. So it's the fact that, like, you know, it's like Sisko was always supposed to be their emissary, and that their chosen one, not the one chosen by Bajor or the Bajoran people, and that. And this guy just kind of got kicked back to the curb in that, because, like, you know, the prophets had no concept of time. For them, it was like he was there, he was always there. For him, it was like probably a matter of like hours and that. And it was the same thing with the prophets. They just kind of kicked him out in the wrong order.
Yeah. Yeah.
I do think there is one part where the prophets say we sent him for the Sisko or something like that.
Maybe. I honestly forget. I don't see it as the prophets being manipulative. I don't. I see it. I get what Hawk is saying. They just don't have any sense of time, right? I do think that it's very, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? The ship just kind of coming out of the wormhole right as he's like, I'm maybe not feeling this role, is a little suspicious, but at the same time, the prophets work in mysterious ways.
That's all you can really put it down to.
I had to say the quote because it's true.
Yeah.
I think that he's manipulative. I think that the religious sect is manipulative. I think that Kai Wynn is manipulative. I think there's so many factors that went into this. It's so hard because, like, you do kind of see it as a test for Sisko, but I don't see it as a test from the prophets. I just this episode is so layered, right? Because, like you said, MC, he's from a time where Bajor wasn't occupied by the Cardassians.
It was a Bajor at peace in that they were pursuing, like, you know, their cultural interests, like, with, you know, much gusto, but at the same time, it was divided. It was a caste system in that, and it was like you saw how ugly that could get, you know, like with that one woman giving up her seat to Kira without even being asked.
Well, and I don't know how much you guys realize this, but yes, like we're talking about how Sisko and Jesus have a lot of, like, their two stories are very connected. But I don't know if you guys know how deeply the Bajoran religion is based off of Judaism too, right? And like the caste system there as well. Like, I mean, what Okorum tries to do in this episode is basically like bring things to how like Hasidic and Orthodox like Jewish systems work, right? And it's not good, right? There's a lot of sexism involved. There's a lot of bad, and I'm saying that as someone who is like part of like the crunchiest Jewish denomination as possible, but it's just so inappropriate what he comes and does. And I don't know how much the prophets meant to do this, but I think that they could have stopped it sooner. Like it sucks that someone had to die, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and that's what we're seeing. We still see today with with fanatical religion. Like, you know, people die in the name of God, and people die in the name of the prophets in this, and people die in the name of the emissary. To have it be one of the priests too, right?
Mm.
Is just it's hard because I can honestly do a whole episode about this episode.
Oh yeah.
I'm just glad that this is, you know, despite the fact that someone has to die, it is the episode that like really cements him in as the emissary, and he really never questions it again.
Oh yeah.
Until the question comes up of whether he should marry Cassidy. And I really like that about this episode. By the end of it again, when a couple comes to get his blessing, he's smiling and just boom, he's in it. There's so many layers in this episode.
Correct me if I'm wrong. This is the episode where he finally stopped calling them wormhole aliens, right?
I don't think.
I believe
is
so.
it?
Because there was a
other
point,
people,
like
other
Sisko
people
was
do.
still, there was a point where even Sisko was still referring to them as the wormhole aliens and that. And I think by the end of it, he started like, you know, really embracing them as the prophets.
At least in the next episode that we're going to be talking about, Jadzia specifically calls them out for it's like, I remember when you used to call them wormhole aliens.
Yes.
So yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if that this was when they started to do that. So we should probably move on to the next one, because this is another one that we could probably do an entire episode about. Most of these episodes of that, oh my God, there's so many good ones. We're talking about Rapture. And this is another leveling up of Sisko in the role of the emissary. And talking about this one in terms of the prophets is actually kind of cheaty, because the prophets do not appear in it at all. It's focused solely on Sisko. But I think what still makes it a prophet episode is that usually in this type of episodes, we'd see the orb shadows, we'd see Sisko's visions, but all of those happen off screen. So I feel like with the structure of this episode, we're actually seeing Sisko's role as the emissary and his relationship with the prophets from everybody else's perspective, from the admirals, from Jadzia. And it's so disconcerting.
Yeah, because this is the one where basically, like, it's interesting, like you say, that we see that from everybody else's perspective when we don't actually see what's going on in his head and that. And I think it's meant to really kind of take into account, like, you know, what is his role? Like, if he's an emissary of the prophets and that, like, you know, how does that actually impact his duties and that as a commander in Starfleet and that? And we see, like, at this point, you know, it really did come to a head in that him off pursuing religious visions and that, well, promise, you know, all while, like, you know, the whole, you know, signing Bajor into the Federation was upon him and that. And yeah, it's like, it's really the first time we saw him in direct conflict with the Starfleet, you know, taking his role as the emissary, like, you know, way more seriously than he does his duty to Starfleet, and that can be really disconcerting.
I messaged you guys about this episode and was like, holy shit, Rapture. Even though in the ending of this episode, watching it again, like, it hits just so hard, like how you see Sisko in this. And being older and watching the series again, specifically this episode, and MC, you have the question here, Starfleet right about their hesitance about Sisko being the emissary. Watching this again, like, my opinion, I feel like has changed, and to a big yes. I think that they are right, because there's a major conflict of interest here, right? Like, you are the captain of what is probably at this point in time the most important space station in Starfleet, and maybe in the entire Alpha, Beta, and Gamma quadrants. You are also a religious icon, not far away from being compared to Jesus Christ. That is an issue. It is this what we talk about all the time in current political climates, the separation between church and state. Starfleet should have removed Ben. I really believe that. I think Ben could have stayed on Deep Space Nine, but it would have had to be in a non-Starfleet role. I really believe that, because what happens in this episode has extremely major consequence. I know we're going to talk about that in the next bullet point, but yeah, I think they actually have a very strong argument to say, like, I think we might need a change of leadership here, whether it's straight up just putting Kira in command, having this just become a completely Bajoran run station. But at this point, with this episode and everything going on, it was a very slippery slope.
And
Yeah, no,
also
I definitely agree. Oh, sorry. Go
That's
ahead.
okay. And also throw on top of that he is suffering from like some serious like medical issue throughout the entire thing. So it's like, it does raise the question about like, like how much of this is like, actual visions and how much of it is him like basically slowly dying.
And I think that's one of the reasons why they had to do this episode without showing his visions, because you had to have that level of doubt where it's like, what is exactly going on with him? And I honestly think if he hadn't been dying and if Julian hadn't done like the whole operation on him, which I have opinions on, and I'll talk about that in a little bit, I think Sisko would have left Starfleet. Because I think like his mind was completely like he was the emissary, and Bashir even says that in the episode.
Yeah,
he was no longer the captain.
And do you guys like also realize how almost fanatical, not like hard like bad fanaticism, but like Kira gets extremely fanatical in this episode as well. Like really just fully buys into Benjamin as the emissary, and that like this is a very major turning point, whatever is happening with him. I thought that was also very interesting, to the point where she's trying to stop them from having Ben undergo the surgery, right? Like,
oh yeah, we don't. There was so much talk about, like, seriously, this outline is so long, but I didn't get to talk about Kira much in all of this. And there's so much with her, and there's probably going to be another Bajoran religion episode somewhere down the line because there's way too much to talk about. So, but yeah, no, I mean, her like basically enabling him.
yes.
And I mean, like, yes, kind of at the end, she does come around on things because she is, understands where Jake is coming from. But yeah, she does encourage him to do some pretty dangerous things. But Kira's always been very fanatical about the religion, to the point that if they had done in the season 8 pitch, didn't they make her a Vedic?
She's Vedic. Yeah, she's Kai Kira.
Oh, she's Kai?
She's Kai. It's very, dude, don't get me started. When we did the documentary episode of the pod, we were all like, fuck these guys for doing the writer's room season 8 pitch. Like, we want it so bad. It was such a unique story that they were coming up with. I hope that Ron Moore and Ira can talk to Colin and Jackson and do a DS9 season 8 comic that is considered canon, because I'm fucking here for it the minute they decide to do it. Anyway, sorry.
That's going to depend on legacy, I think.
Yeah.
So we have Sisko's vision of warning for Bajor joining the Federation, which is a huge turning point in the entire series, because it's only because of that Bajor does not join the Federation, and it saves Bajor in the Dominion War once Cardassia joins them at the end of the season. But we find out in Sacrifice of Angels, the prophets like really don't give a shit about anything that's going on unless it's the Sisko. So I'm wondering, since this is all focused on Sisko, and he is a prophet, is it possible that this vision is not from the prophets, but from Sisko himself?
I have a lot of opinions about this, so I asked
the whole thing. Like the accident he has in that, and it very specifically gives him like, with this medical ailment, it very specifically gives him like, that kind of heightened sense in that. I kind of want to say it's like when the veil is lifted, it's like, people, like, I'm not a very spiritual person myself in that, like, but like this year with like everything that was going on with my mom and that, and her passing and that, but like when she was getting close, she was starting to talk about like, her relatives that had passed, and she had like a couple of relatives pass before her, like in the years previous and that. And she was very specifically talking about like, seeing like her two sisters who had passed, nobody else, you know. It freaked me out a little bit. And the whole point, the whole way through this episode, it's like, he is like, it is that thing where it's like he is dying and that. And it's like a lot of this could be the prophets and that, but a lot of this could just be like, you know, the brain death that he is experiencing. So I like that they left it mysterious, that it was really up to you to decide, what was happening. He was accurate and he was right, and it's like there's something to be said about that, but at the same time, it could really have gone either way, either these were visions and that from the prophets, or it was like, it was basically just, he was experiencing a brain death.
Oh man. I don't know, even though we do see it, right? Like, I don't know if Bajor listening to Sisko in this situation does in fact save them from the Dominion, right? I think that this was a very, oh man, I think it was a mistake, right? Like it's hard to, because even though Kai Wynn's an evil bitch, like, and very manipulative, she brings up a great point throughout this episode about how we are just coming out of the occupation and now we're about to join the Federation. And I forget who says it, but like, the Federation and the occupation, they're not the same thing. Like, like it's free. And like, I understand Kai Wynn's point to this, but I also think that Bajor joining the Federation would have brought them a lot of benefits too, right? I think that DS9 would have probably been a lot more fortified by the time the Cardassians joined the Dominion. You'd have it be a completely Starfleet station. You'd have the Bajoran militia. We're talking about military and religion now. You'd have the Bajoran militia replaced by Starfleet. You'd have their fleet replaced by Starfleet vessels. You have a much more fortified DS9 all of a sudden if Bajor does in fact join the Federation. Sisko barging into that room is so controversial because on one hand, the rest of the show plays out and we see how everything works. Like, at the same time, he probably should have lost his command of the station for this. It's a very consequential thing that he does. And I think it was not good. Obviously the series goes a different way, but I think if this was something that was based more in reality, this would have been a very, like, have a lot more consequences than we see in the show.
I'm going to actually disagree with you on them joining the Federation and how that would have helped them fortify things, because the Admiral goes over just like how much they're going to have to do over the next couple of months. It's only like 3 episodes from now that Cardassia joins the Dominion.
I think you're right. Yeah.
Yeah. So there definitely would not be enough time. And by the end of season 5, like, Gul Dukat's already saying, it's like, I'm going to take over Bajor again. And the Dominion's like, no, you're not. We got a pact of non-aggression.
Yeah.
So the pact of non-aggression is really like the only thing that protects Bajor for the next year. Like, eventually they do say, like, fuck this noise, we're siding with the Federation and all of this. So yeah, I mean, I am kind of on the side. And the locusts were obviously, that was the Dominion coming in. So I think like that Sisko does have a point. But also from the Starfleet perspective, they don't know any of this. We have hindsight of 2020. They're looking at it as like, this guy just fucked this up for us. This thing that he's been working on for 5 years, and he just wants to keep getting worshipped. So, why are we going to let him stay here?
It's so true in that. I mean, like, if Starfleet held any sort of like semblance of reality in that. Like he would have been like on the next ship home, after that little outburst, and that because he just sounded like a madman.
That's the thing, right? Like the fact that he kept his command is very troubling. But I mean, that's Starfleet again making horrible.
It had to do mainly with like the fact that they knew he was sick at that point. Like after that, it was like pretty much he spent the rest of the episode in like sick bay. It's just that he happened to be right. It was the only thing. And then, like, when you're right, you're right. Like, I mean, like at that point, if Bajor did sign on, I mean, that's the risk like all species take when they sign on to the Federation. And that sure they get the benefits of the alliance and that, access to technologies, medicines, the defense of Starfleet. But once you join, you also take on Starfleet's enemies too.
Yes, good point. Yeah, Michael Kwan actually writes, at best, if Bajor joins the United Federation of Planets, the Bajoran system is the biggest battleground of the Dominion War. So another good point.
Which it kind of was anyway.
Yeah, it was anyway. So yeah.
It was just delayed like for a little bit.
Yeah. So
this next point, this is really stupid. Nobody has to say anything in response to it. This is just
I have no idea how to answer this.
So in this episode, we get the new uniforms. Like they specifically point out that they're wearing the new uniforms. But when we find Bashir in the prison camp, he's wearing the old uniform. So this episode where Bashir does like major brain surgery on Sisko is a freaking changeling. So I just wanted to throw this out. Is it possible that Sisko is actually fine? And this changeling Bashir saying Sisko was in danger was a gambit to destabilize Sisko and Bajor? I mean, I doubt it. I think that it's just the writers had no idea that Bashir was a changeling at the time. But
I think they did. I think I think this writer's room is that good. I think that they knew what they were doing.
They should have told Sid then. He didn't know.
You tell Sid, he starts acting differently then. Just saying, like, you start playing a role a little bit differently. He still played it very Bashir, right?
Yeah.
You have a medical department. You have nurses surrounding you. You have Kira, who at this point is watching every single of Ben, like every moment of Ben's life. I don't think it was a gambit by the Dominion. I think that Ben was dying. I think that someone would have said something had it been like, no, doctor, these readings are not what you're saying. Yeah.
Maybe I just wanted to have Changeling Bashir have a point.
Why not?
I really I don't know. I have no idea. Like, I don't know if that was Bashir or not, or if it was a changeling. I mean, if it was a changeling in that, I mean, do they at all take on any of the memories or
yes.
like, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's how he would know have a medical background, right? Yeah. Enough to do brain surgery on.
Well, wait, no, I'm sorry. They don't.
They don't take on memories.
I'm thinking of the scrolls.
That's right.
But I do think that they are very deep cover operatives. So by the time that changeling is taken over Julian, they are a seasoned medical practitioner, right? Because you have to
they train for the role that they were taking on. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, they're also keeping him alive in a prison camp, probably to make sure they have all of the information they need on him.
I mean, how Gowron is Gowron, right? Like, yeah. Or no, I'm sorry. How it's fucking Martok. How Martok is Martok.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, Gowron's just Gowron.
But that's how much Martok he is that you think it's Gowron.
Yeah, see, there you go.
So the next episode we're talking about, we're going on like an entire season, basically.
Literally.
Forward.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that's to Sacrifice of Angels, which is kind of already getting into the, thick of the Dominion War. And, up until this point, the prophets have been passive in their interactions with corporeal life. Like, they weren't going to interfere with the Dominion War, but Sisko forces their hand. The only time before that they interacted with them, it was kind of like, we're gonna give you some vague advice that you can take or not. But how do we feel about them actually being used as de ex machina? Like, they're literally de ex machina.
Big way too, right? Making an entire fleet of Jemadar reinforcements just poof vanish. Yeah. But then again, like I believe this is Sisko forcing Sisko was forcing their hand. And that it's like they really didn't have any choice in that. If they, if they wanted to keep their emissary alive, then
and
this is what they
their
had to
adopted
do.
children, like you said, Hawk.
Yeah, and the Bajorans. I mean, like I know, like I mentioned about how, like they never interfered in the occupation or anything like that. For whatever reasons. I mean, yeah, they're like they're fourth dimensional beings that exist out of time and that. So it's like this is just simply the occupation was simply a blip on their radar and that something they could go forward, backwards, or completely around. But yeah, this would have meant like pretty much that their children were in danger too, but they still didn't like being tested, did they?
Nope.
Just on a small aside, talking about them not being involved with the occupation, they might not have known about the occupation. They don't seem to know anything about corporeal life until Sisko comes to see them.
It's true.
And you're talking about them being of Bajor and them being like having adopted Bajor as their children. Like the fire caves are on Bajor, so the paw wraiths are on Bajor. Part of me wonders if they literally are of Bajor, that they've ascended from Bajor, like they were like the original people that were there, and then they just like went up with the koala or whatever.
Like the Atlanteans ascending, like the ancients in Atlantis and SG-1.
I have never seen SG-1, but I mean, yes, I guess so.
Similar. I have a lot of problems with this. I don't like it. This is one thing I've never liked. I think unfortunately the writers' room wrote themselves into a bit of a corner with the minefield and having thousands of Dominion ships coming through the wormhole. I don't like any time that the bad guys just poof away, except Avengers Endgame. I'll allow it because I love that movie. I don't like it. That being said, it doesn't stop the Dominion War from becoming any worse. So, I mean, because at that point, if they come through, the Dominion War is over. The Dominion won, they take over the galaxy, period, end of story. That's just it. Like, that was their hand. They were going to win. I think that, like, had they done this and then everything was just kind of all hunky-dory and the Dominion War kind of became an afterthought of the series and it's an even bigger problem, the show gets away with it because there's still a lot of death, a lot of bad that happens, right? Like the Dominion War doesn't just go away because the Dominion fleet gets poofed away. So I don't like it. I don't accept it. So, sorry, what's the stupid quote? I don't like it. I don't agree with it, but I accept it. So there you go.
Yeah, I think something like the Dominion fleet looks really good in the writer's room, like when it comes to the cliffhanger. But then when they come back to next season after their vacation, it's like, oh shit, we have to figure out what's up with this.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, like, I think the cooler thing is they come through, the minefield explodes and they go boom. Like, it's war. That's cool. Explosions. Budget maybe becomes an issue. I don't know. I don't know.
One thing I kind of noticed while going through these episodes, and that's from this point on, the prophets are actually very involved with corporeal existence, considering they were super hands-off beforehand. But they kind of go from being mystical spirit advisors and just become involved in things. And not only are they involved, Sisko's actually usually the one doing stuff for them. Like, they're always like, hey, can you do us the solid? So we are told that there's going to be a price for them obliterating this Dominion army. And I think there's several possibilities as to what that price is. But is it possible that the prophet's saying, you work for us now, is actually that price.
I think that's maybe one of the prices. I also think Jadzia is one of those prices. She has to be one of those prices later down the line, right? That's also a consequence of the reckoning. But yeah, it's hard not to see it that way, right?
Yeah, I mean, like, my mind kind of goes back, if the Bajorans are in any way a relation to, kind of like a metaphor for the Jews and that. I mean, like, when Moses parted the Red Sea by God's hand, and that there was a penance to be paid, right? Wandering through the desert 40 years for like everyone, right?
Yep.
So it's like you can't get something as miraculous as what happened for nothing, which was, and Sisko, he ends up paying that price. I don't necessarily think that was Jadzia and that. I thought basically like the price that he was going to have to pay was his son, Jake, later on.
Or him having to leave his corporeal existence at the end of the series as well.
Yeah, no, but like, it's like when you ask for, when you ask for the hand of God not to intervene in anything on that, there's a price to pay, Look at Pulp Fiction. Look at Pulp Fiction.
If you think about it,
no, that's a great point, Hawk.
Part of the way that Sisko explains corporeal linear time to the prophets is you make a choice, and then these are the roads you go down. And the prophets are kind of saying, if you make this choice, bad things are going to happen. And kind of when we go into the next episode talking about the prophets, like the price there would have been Jake, because Jake gets taken over by a freaking Palwraith. But that gets put off. And then suddenly Jadzia is put in the way. And there's just kind of this constant, this almost, Job-like, bad things are now happening to Sisko because of this one thing.
Yeah. Sorry, I totally lost track. Are we on the reckoning now?
We were just about to get onto the reckoning. We were just finishing up with Sacrifice of Angels, because the next one is the reckoning, which I have very little written actually about this, but I have a lot to say because this episode is, again, like the from Accession and Rapture. I really like this episode because it's just so messed up. Like, this is the Bajoran apocalypse. This is Bajoran faith, which has been very spiritual. It's now very physical. You got to put your latinum where your mouth is in terms of your faith. And Sisko and Kira are proven to be people of faith because they are actually going to allow this to happen. Jake is wary of the prophets and their influence on his dad, so that allows the Palwraith to take him over. And then you have Kai Wynn, who is supposed to be the leader of the Bajoran religion, and she just completely loses her faith in this episode. And from this point on, it's just going to be a continued downward trajectory for her in terms of her religious beliefs.
I really like the back and forth struggle between Sisko and his power as the emissary in this episode, and Kai Wynn's power as, like you said, kind of the Pope of the Bajoran people, right? Like, she feels so threatened in this episode, right? Because one, she's always been jealous of that the prophets have talking to Sisko, right? But now Sisko's at a point as the emissary where he could just beam down onto the planet, and he's being contacted before even Kai Wynn about Bajoran religious artifacts, right? And he then has the power to just bring those aboard the station at his leisure, right? And that is a very big threat to Kai Wynn's image as the Kai of the Bajorans. I love that she goes to basically like her enemy in who is it? Vedic, who's the Vedic at this point? It's not Barial. Anyway, the fact that like she has to stoop low to ask someone she doesn't like to get the reckoning tablet back to Bajor. Like, I really like that struggle, and I do love again at the end of this, like how she has really lost her faith. Like this is a very, very good episode talking about the Bajoran apocalypse, right? Oh, so good.
Yeah, this is one Louise Fletcher really puts in like kind of a master class in this one. Not just as manipulative and like talking to them, like talking to Kira about it's like the reckoning and that, and like how can it not be a great thing in that if the prophet wins and that, then it brings about 1,000 years of peace and that no more and no more Kais, no more Vedics, no more emissaries, and she sounds almost delighted about it and that, even though she will be losing her position. The infighting between her and Ben over the tablet and that, him presuming that he could remove it and that. I mean, there's a reason, it's like there's something a little condescending about the way when she refers to somebody as my child and that, it's very much from a position of condescension, right? And then like, everything kind of that takes that turn and that, Kira is chosen as the vessel of the prophet.
And not win, right?
Not win, and not even acknowledging win. And that, it's like when she offers herself in supplication and says, I am your tool, please tell me what I'm supposed to do. And she has nothing for her to do, nothing to offer her, and like, yeah, this is that moment where she like, it's that heel turn for her. And that as bad as she was before, and that it became worse and that, because she interfered directly in what the prophets wanted.
And maybe I give the writers too much credit because I gave them a lot of credit about the Bashir thing, but like I feel like this also really sets her arc up for the entire rest of the series. Like you're saying, Hawk, like it's her villain turn, all the way to working with, with why am I forgetting his name? He's the lead villain of the fucking show.
Dukat.
God damn it, Dukat. Working with Dukat in the paw race. Jesus Christ, I'm sick when I can't remember Dukat's name. Yeah, it's a great point, Hawk.
I think you're actually right. You're not giving the writers too much credit. In this case, I might disagree with you on the Bashir thing. But actually, I read in the original draft of this, Wynn was supposed to be possessed by the Pari.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. And then they had trouble like breaking the end of the episode, and they realized it's like, no, like Sisko's got to have that Abraham moment where he's like, I'm going to sacrifice my son. And, Kai Wynn instead has this crisis of faith, which she never recovers from because, yeah, she does get totally ignored by the prophets. And by the end of the season, she's already kind of falls under the sway of Dukat and gets into learning about the paw wraiths. So, like, like her downfall. Well, I mean, her downfall's been going on since the beginning of the series. Let's face it. Like, she's always been a hate sink. But from here on out, like, her actual belief in the prophets is gone. Like, don't meet your heroes, I guess.
Yeah. Literally. Yeah. Yeah. It's a great episode. It really is. It really is. And then somehow, the Reckoning tablet goes from being broken on the floor of Deep Space Nine to Picard's study table.
And also, Jake was kind of right. Like, he was wary of the prophets, and he's like, I feel like I'm going to lose you. I mean, he wasn't wrong.
No.
Like Ben was ready to let it go. Like, he was willing to like trust that the prophets would save him. But like he did not look like he was going to be saved. He looked like he was going to be
he was absolutely gonna die.
Yeah. 100%. I think both of you already said this too. Colin writes Louise Fletcher was a just masterclass in acting. Come to life.
Oh yeah.
Episode. I mean, really, like any time that she put on Kai Wynn's robes, like, God, you love to hate her. She's one of the best villains in Star Trek ever.
Yeah, well, she does the role so well. I know. We all know, like, besides this, she was Nurse Ratched.
Yeah, and Cuckoo's Nest.
Yeah. Did you guys ever see Flowers in the Attic, though?
No.
Oh,
no.
God. It's that V.C. Andrews book and that, and she plays, like, the evil grandmother in that. Oh, my God.
Oh, I could see her playing the evil grandmother in Flowers.
Oh, she's
bad. Yeah. I'm kind of vamping because I want to talk about the next one.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the next episode is Tears of the Prophets. And this episode marks the melding of the Dominion War with the War of the Prophets, because for a long time, we've kind of been building up this Prophets versus the Paw-Wraiths. And now we get it illustrated through Dukat, who at this moment was a major figure in the Dominion. But now he becomes the emissary of the Paw-Wraiths, which he becomes Sisko's absolute shadow figure. Yeah. So while this external Dominion war continues, Sisko starts his private war with Dukat as the emissaries. So how well do you think these plots work together to move towards the climax of the series?
It's a very loaded question, MC.
I know, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know where to begin with this, right? Because I think you kind of answer it just like in the question. It begins like the whole culmination of the series, right? Like Dukat goes from being nothing to something again, right? Like all of a sudden he's not back in favor with Wayun and the founders, but he's now on his own path. He's on his own mission. And if him and Sisko were not already arch, because listen, they've always been like, you know, like arch nemesis, right, to each other. But there's been times where it's been a friendly rivalry throughout the series. Mm-hmm. But from this point on, and obviously we're going to talk about it in the next bullet point, it goes from being arch nemesis to like, I'm going to fucking kill you. Like it does. It really, I don't know what else to say, because you just hit it right in the head in here. Like it just sets up the rest of Deep Space Nine so very well. And the way, God damn, I'm going to try and talk about this without talking about the next bullet point, but like the way that this fucks with Sisko so badly, not just because of the next bullet point, but just because of what Dukat has become, that he almost gives everything up, is so good. And just like you said, such a great setup for going in to season 7. It's so good, because when Kira goes into that ready room, bullet point, you guys know what we're fucking getting to. Notwithstanding, she's like, I was afraid of that. He takes the baseball. He may not come back, right? Like Dukat has broken him. Mm-hmm. And that's very important. So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, ZL was the tipping point for him, right? Yeah. Like, yeah, that mm-hmm. was where the House of Cards fell down, and like all he had left was really his revenge in that. And it's not even like he was really it wasn't even like he was really a believer in the Paw race and that, but like they were a tool for him, you know, a tool for his revenge. And they're obviously with the Paw race, everything just aligned together in that. It's like, hey, it's like you hate Sisko and the emissary and that. It's like, we hate Sisko and the emissary too. Let's work together. I mean, because he doesn't fully go Paw Wraith in this night. It's almost
not
like
quite yet. Yeah.
He finds like it's almost like a temporary infusion of the Paw Wraith power in that, you know. But also this is that one instance where Sisko did not heed the warnings of the prophets, right? That he chose the path back through, you know, he was choosing his duty to Starfleet in this one, and that over like the wishes of the prophets and that. And we see how that worked out. And so as far as like the plots working together and move it towards the climax of the series and that, yeah, it does work very well. You know, it elevates Dukat from, you know, that respectful back and forth between enemies and that to basically like he advances to boss level at this point.
I actually went very light on the Paw Wraiths in this because, again, so much stuff to talk about. Like, there's enough for a Paw Wraith episode, I'm telling you.
This is, we watched so many episodes to prepare for this. They all kind of blend together. This is also the episode with the orbital stations, right? Like, so much happens here, right? Like, Ben gets tested on so many different fronts, right? Like, they end up completing their objective, but it comes at such like a high price, you know? Like, such a fucking good episode. It's It's amazing to say that, right? Because it is. But MC, I'm sorry.
We have to talk about Jadzia. This episode has the death of Jax at the hands of Dukat. So back in Sacrifice of Angels, we were talking about Sisko's penance, and Julian already mentioned Jadzia as possibly Sisko's penance. But also, Hawk, you mentioned that the prophets actually warned Sisko to not leave. And it's only after Sisko leaves that Jadzia dies. So which is it? Is it the penance for asking the prophets to interfere in Sacrifice of Angels that causes the death of Dax and cutting off the prophets from Bajor, because those happen at the same time?
Yes.
Or is it that Sisko chose his duties as a Starfleet officer over being the emissary?
I still think that it's the penance. I very much do, because even if Sisko's on the station, is he going to be in that room at the same time as Jadzia and Dukat when he releases the power race? No. Like, it just, Dukat got on that station. He found a way. Oh, this is a really good question that we're definitely going to discuss in the chat. Yeah, no, I think it is the penance. I think it's at least a form of the penance. I think there's some more penance for Sisko. But yeah, no, I think this is very much it. There was a price, and this was it.
Yeah. I don't know. Like, I kind of half and half agree. Like, I think it was not the penance in that, but it was also, it was a harsh lesson. I mean, I don't know if Sisko could have done anything for Dax if he had remained on the station.
I don't think so either.
Yeah. But at the same time, he did choose to ignore them, and he decided to, to fulfill his duties to Starfleet instead and to go out on that mission. And it was a price, and but it hurt. It hurt.
He does get a
him.
lot of pressure from Ross to be on the Defiant for that mission.
He does, yeah, and again, that's this thing. It's like this is why he gave up, like back in a session in that one, he was willing to give up the emissary role, and that is because it was like you have two worlds that are just pulling at you, and that it's like telling you that there's one path or another in that, and it's like,
and why they should have shit canned him in Rapture.
Yeah, it's an impossible choice to make. I don't know if this was the ultimate penance in that, but it was basically, it because it hurt the prophets as much as it hurt Sisko at that point, right?
Yeah. MC, if you don't mind, I'm gonna Michael Kwan's comment.
I want to talk about this question
Jadzia, is this a fridging? Discuss. So I'm gonna preface this question by saying, if you'd like a deeper discussion about this isn't just a plug, but I think it's really important. Go listen to it early on in Strange New Pod's existence. We reviewed and deep dived the Deep Space Nine documentary, What We Left Behind. We talk about this a lot. I'm going to say this very hesitantly and don't think that I agree with the decision, because I don't. I think everything that happened surrounding Jadzia Dax and Terry Farrell is complete fucking bullshit. But is this a fridging in the technical fridging term that we talk about today with a lot of female characters? I'm going to say no.
I would agree with you with that, because while it does cause both Sisko and Worf pain, that is not the purpose of it. The purpose is to get rid of Jadzia because Rick Berman was an asshole and had problems with Terry Farrell.
Paramount execs were... Yeah, so that was the entire reason they killed her. That it was not for any sort of storytelling purposes to cause man pain. Yes, they created man pain from it, but of course they did. So, I mean, the technical term of fridging is that a female character is killed for the sole purpose of causing a male character pain, which is not what this was.
Yeah, I agree. There wasn't fridging in the traditional sense in that, because there was just too much backstage bullshit that was going on, and that actually led to the decision. Yep.
But for a deeper discussion again, I will go on record and say that our deep dive of What We Left Behind is one of my favorite episodes we've ever recorded of this podcast. So go listen to that.
So that ends out the season on like the worst note because, as you said, Sisko ends up leaving and he takes his baseball.
Sorry, can I just say really quickly, MC?
Yes.
Because I said it and then I wanted to follow up on it. This episode fucking rocks, right?
Oh, it's amazing.
This episode is so fucking good. And it has one of like the most heartbreaking endings for all the wrong purposes. That's what I love about Deep Space Nine so much. And when you also hear like talk about this cast talking about it, even with all the controversy surrounding Terry Farrell and what happened with Dax in this episode, Tears of the Prophets is still one of the best episodes of this show, which is something crazy to say. Anyway, sorry.
Oh, no, I mean, like, that's totally okay because you are absolutely correct. Like, this episode is so good. And by having something this terrible happen in it, that's amazing. I usually don't watch episodes where characters die in it because they make me too sad, but I will watch Tears of the Prophets because it's really good. But yeah, the most downer of downer endings. Jedzia is dead. Sisko leaves and he takes his baseball, which is a sign of I might not be coming back. And the next arc, the things are at its bleakest. The prophets are cut off from Bajor. The Bajorans are confused, scared, and some have turned to the cult of the Pa Wraiths. It's chaos for them. Sisko's sequestered himself on Earth, but he's still receiving visions from the prophets and a way to restore them. And this is where Sisko's origins comes out. He is the son of a prophet. Solely from a character perspective, how do we feel about this development for Sisko?
Who wants to go first? Actually,
Okay. God, I've never talked about this before, so I don't actually know what like the ranging opinion on this is. To me, it's the natural development of the character. For years, we've heard he is of Bajor. He is the Sisko, right? Of course, he's the son of a prophet. Matt brought up earlier in the chat that, where is it? He wrote, the prophets literally created Sisko by possessing Sarah. Is it a little bit of hand waviness because up until this point, like Sisko had to teach them about linear time, that it was weird that they somehow literally created Sisko? Yeah, but we could forgive that because I still think it's the natural evolution of the character, and it just kind of makes sense. I liked it. I love it.
yeah. I mean, it was kind of heavy on the, the chosen one.
He's Jesus. Again, sorry, he's Jesus.
Yeah.
He's space
right?
Jesus. Y'all need to find space Jesus.
And yeah, it does come into a bit of conflict with some of the earliest because they're obviously aware of corporeal beings and that, if she basically the prophet like possessed this woman Sarah and that for a time enough to get to meet Ben's father, marry, have Ben, and then kind of leave. Like from what I gather in that is basically this woman Sarah and that it's like when the prophets had completed its task and that like at some point they just kind of left her Sarah, and it's like I'm wondering how confused she was in that.
Yeah, that's actually my next point, and I can bring that up now.
Yeah,
this is hella problematic because a prophet possesses an unwilling woman so she can give birth to Sisko, and as soon as the prophet leaves, she's just like, yeah, I'm out of here because I don't want this. We have a word for that. It's a crime word. Was there a better way for them to do this?
Yeah. I mean, you could go the Mary Magdalene way, right? And it's just immaculate conception. You could have gone that route.
Not Mary Magdalene, Mother Mary.
Thank you, Jesus.
Yep.
No pun intended. Sorry. Yes,
That's okay.
Mother Mary. This is why I'm a Jew and not a Christian. Yeah, they could have done that. But They didn't. They went a little bit more controversial. Again, not an excuse by any means. It was the 90s. The shit was not being talked about as much. It should have been, but it wasn't. Yeah. There were about 1,000 different ways they could have done this, and they went the wrong route.
I mean, it worked for the Phantom Menace, right?
I think the problem is we'd already been introduced to Sisko's dad, and we were still a couple of years from Star Trek Mpreg.
Star Trek what?
Mpreg. Oh, do you not know the term Mpreg? That's male pregnancy.
Oh, no, I know the term Mpreg. Are we talking about Trip?
Trip and Rutherford.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, it has happened in Star Trek, but if we were gonna have like a prophet whisper in Joseph's ear, that might make Ben Sisko have more questions.
Oh my God. Ben's dad is named fucking Joseph.
Yeah. I mean, maybe they did know it from the beginning.
We see you, Deep Space Nine. We see you.
Obviously, the prophets were actually the writer's room at DS9, and that because they saw this whole thing not as a linear progression of time and that, but just flat circle.
You know, actually thinking about it, this episode probably came out around the same time as the Phantom Menace because you mentioned
99.
Yeah. Sisko eventually finds Sarah and releases her, and the prophets are back. And then we get into the end of the series where Sisko's trial of faith leading towards the end. Because since Sacrifice of Angels, the prophets have told Sisko that he will find no rest on Bajor. Still, Sisko buys land on Bajor to build a house, which I'm wondering how he was able to buy it. Because
did he buy it, or was it gifted to him?
Well, I mean,
he doesn't specifically say he bought
he doesn't
it.
say
He just says it now belongs to me.
He does say he owns it, though.
Okay,
he says he owns it.
But once you're gifted it, you're gifted it, you own it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the idea of property is still weird.
And money.
But yes, so he gets property so he can build a house. He's geeking out over building the model for it. He proposes
Man has to
Cassidy.
have room in his kitchen so no one's dipping their fingers in the pot.
I fucking love Sisko so much. Like, I haven't said that yet. I really love Sisko. Like, he's an engineering dork. He is a cooking dork. Like, he's a man after my own heart.
Oh, I know. Remember he took up amateur sailing?
Yes.
And he builds it himself.
Yeah.
But yeah, so he's going to set down roots on Bajor. He proposes to Cassidy, and Cassidy even becomes pregnant. Yeah, that's a little oopsie doopsie, but it still happens. So right before they get married, he does consider like not going through with it because the prophets are like, no, dude, this is not a good idea. Like, as he's putting the ring on her finger, the prophets are like, dude, don't do this. And still he does it. He decides he needs to forge his own path. I am like, between this and Trexpert, I'm known for my hard questions, but does Sisko make the right choice?
No. Wait, with marrying Cassidy?
Yes.
Yes. I have a no for later. Sorry. Yes, 100%. Fuck the prophets in this situation. Even
Cassidy did.
No, like, even to the point where like Kira is furious, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you cannot live your life, religious icon, Jesus Christ or not, by listening to everything. And again, we have to say this. They may be the gods to the Bajoran people, but they are an alien species, right? They are not. Ooh, do I actually say this out loud? Ooh.
Oh, do it. Say it.
They are not actual prophets. They're not.
Ooh,
They're not. They don't exist.
spicy takes tonight.
They're not though. They
it's
don't.
true.
I mean,
They
yeah.
don't. Sure, they don't exist in linear time, but that doesn't prevent them from still just being a higher form of life, not an actual god. And even though Sisko is the prophet and he knows he's the prophet, I mean the emissary, he still knows that deep in his heart that they are still just another species, whether they are a higher form of being like the Q continuum, a Trelane, a giant green hand, the Organians. That's what they are still. So to live your life listening to their word as gospel, you cannot do that. Just like when he goes against them in Tears of the Prophets. Yes, he made the right decision marrying the love of his life. He needed to find happiness again. He lost Jennifer. He thought he'd never have something like this again. And also, are you going to say no to Cassidy Ace after that look that she gave him?
Absolutely not.
Like, Jesus, no, no. So yes, he made the right decision marrying her. Kira be damned, because Kira was not happy.
I was so pissed at her, like with that stank face on during the wedding. Like, what the fuck, Kira?
Put on a fucking happy face at the wedding. Come on.
The rest of the Bajoran people were happy about it. The emissary was getting married, right?
They didn't know that the prophets had said no.
Again, yeah. I mean, yeah, Julian raises a great point. They are not gods. They are aliens, you know. It would be like living your life in that, like according to the gospel of Q. You know, it's like, you know, Q tells you to go jump off a bridge, and it's like it's Q. I can't disobey Q, you know. But Picard disobeys Q all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, so does Sisko. He punches him in the face.
Exactly.
I think this. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, yeah, you go ahead. Sorry.
If this question had come up in season 6, no question, Sisko would have gone through with it. It's the fact that he knows everything about the prophets now, about his origin, about Sarah. That's why he pauses on it, because he knows that his existence is absolutely because of the prophets now.
Yeah.
So before, it's like the prophets can kind of poke him to do things, but now it's like, well, they know everything about me because I'm a part of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, like, you know, he is inextricably tied to them no matter what, and they already know the outcome of this, don't they?
Do they? Do they really?
I kind of think I don't know. I mean, like, if they see time as they claim to see it, you know, outside of the concept of, you know, beginning and an end, and that, then really they already knew the outcome before it was even made, which, you know, it is about predestination. And that, I think that's basically what Sisko is kind of kicking at them about, you know, is like, you know, is the predestination angle. And that he doesn't like that. You know, it's like there is, like, you know, already a fixed, you know, like agenda to his life, and that he has, you know, he's, you know, it's like it can make you feel like just basically a puppet.
Yeah.
You know?
And that's what I'm saying. You can't do that. Like, you cannot live your life like that. He's still a human being, emissary or not. Well,
half human, half prophet.
Yes. Still.
But also somebody with relations to people, to, you know, he's a father to a son in that. And
does that make Jake a quarter prophet?
I mean, it must.
That explains why he gets along with Nog so well, since Frangies are all about the prophets.
Where's the button? Hit the button.
Okay.
Get off my bridge.
Or this one.
I'm sorry, I'm proud of that one. Proud of it. We'll stand by it.
I need more Deep Space Nine buttons.
Yeah. I think in a way that it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy from the prophets, because they're the ones who end up taking him into the wormhole. Yeah. Like that's the whole reason why he'll find no rest on Bajor, why he shouldn't marry Cassidy, because he's got to eventually go to the Celestial Temple. So, I mean, did they have to take him to the Celestial Temple? No. I mean, I kind of think that's the penance, like the actual penance that he had to pay. Like, sure, like Jake almost dying and Jadzia actually dying pretty bad things, but him actually being taken out of the corporeal world, that's the ultimate price.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, like that was the penance in that, it's like literally throwing himself into like Ducat and that into the the fire caves. To what should be, the death of his own body in that. We know like his body was just, his corporeal body was destroyed in there. So yeah, I think Go on.
So that does bring us to what you leave behind. We get the final battle of Sisko and Ducat down in the fire caves. Final battle of the prophets and the Pirates. This is the reckoning as it was actually supposed to be. After this, the prophets return to the mysterious existence of non-interference. Except in the comics when Sisko appears for like a little brief period of time that we've already been told can only be a brief period of time because Sisko has not returned in the later Star Trek series.
Which I have to ask, who says?
Well, at the very least, the time of Lower Decks.
He's still with the prophets in Lower Decks.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. Shit.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You're right. They needed to add that line. Come on.
Yeah.
I have feelings.
It's Lower Decks.
I have feelings about it.
Yeah. I was gonna say that was one of the questions. How do we feel about this as the end of their story?
Yeah. So no. As much as DS9 is my favorite Star Trek series, that has been reaffirmed rewatching these episodes. The finale still leaves a very sour taste in my mouth. One, even as a kid, and well, especially as a kid who went through what he went through, him leaving his family just left a very sour taste in my mouth. MC, I think you're right. I think this is the penance. I think this is the second. Like, I think there's multiple parts of this penance. I 100% think that Jadzia is a part of the penance. I think this is the final part of that penance. It's still not right. There's no reason he has to go to the prophets and go to the Celestial Temple. At least there's no reason that he has to go for an extended period of time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if everything that we've learned through 7 seasons of Deep Space Nine is that the Bajorans exist in, outside of linear time, then he could have literally disappeared and reappeared, and we could have had a really happy ending.
Mm-hmm.
Everything seems so rushed in what you leave behind. I don't particularly love the final battle. I don't particularly like that he goes with the prophets. I love that he. Do we think he gets? Yes. So Colin, the current ongoing Star Trek run in the comics is considered canon. So Sisko has come back. Sisko has been brought back by the prophets specifically because Kahless has waged war against godlike beings in the Star Trek universe, and the prophets have sent Sisko back to fight them. So Sisko does come back, but like MC says, apparently Sisko has to go back in to the wormhole when this is all done, which I don't like. He does meet the baby, and it's very. They even do that wrong. If I'm being completely honest, there's not enough time spent on it. I really hope that if we get a Star Trek Legacy, that this gets addressed a lot, because I think it needs to. And I know that I'm not the only one who thinks that the DS9 finale was not great, and this decision to have Sisko go with the prophets was not a great decision. So I don't love it as an end to their story after all these amazing episodes that we get. I don't particularly like rewatching What You Leave Behind. Yeah. Yep.
I know I probably agree if the finale felt rushed. I don't know if I totally agree with all the decisions, but again, we were looking at a character from Star Trek, a lead character from Star Trek, who at the outset was something different, someone we hadn't met yet, not just a commander in that, not just someone in charge, another figurehead in that. He was, someone with a religious destiny. And we might not like where it ended up in that, but at the same time, in order to kind of really fulfill the whole promise of the character of Sisko and that from the beginning to the end of the series and that there had to be more to it than just like, oh well, off to my next assignment and that. No,
Well, no,
it's like
no.
yeah,
The Hawk,
yeah,
but
yeah,
it's not off to your next assignment for him, right? It's going
yeah.
to be a fully part of the Bajoran people and living at his house on Bajor and really leaving Starfleet behind and becoming truly the emissary. I think the episode
Mhm.
ends like that. It's a very different conversation we're having.
No, I feel like the decision to have him go off and that there had to be something more epic to this and that, because we looked at, this was a trial he went through and that throughout the entire series and that, with his visions of the prophets trying to interpret their will, what they wanted and that. And it's like it was always a struggle for answers for him, right? From what these beings wanted from him. And now at the end of it, and that he actually gets a chance to find out the answers, why him? Why was this all? Where was his place in this grand design? So it was really an opportunity he could not afford to give up on. And that, regardless of family and everything and that, it's like, wouldn't you want to know why?
Yeah, fair.
Okay, so I did not love this episode either. I think the fact that this finale is the only Star Trek finale to include a fucking montage speaks volumes to how poor it is constructed. I mean, there's some stuff that I enjoy in it, but the stuff with Sisko, Avery Brooks didn't even like it because this wasn't even the original ending. Originally, Sisko was just supposed to be gone, and he made them put in the line that said that he would be back because he said specifically, it's like, Sisko's got 2 kids. I am not going to play a black man who's going to abandon 2 children. And just while you guys were talking, I came up with a rewrite for the end of this episode because, well, first of all, we can keep in basically everything. The prophets warning Ben that can be used more as tests to see, test Ben's fortitude. You have him in the fire caves. They both tumble in. Ben ends up with the prophets. What was the thing that the prophets did for Ben in the emissary? They gave him his life back.
Yeah.
So what do they do when he falls into the fire cave? They give him his life back. And then he chooses to spend that life on Bajor with Cassidy, with their daughter. And it can end like The Mandalorian with them just outside their nice little house.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, maybe it's not the most epic, but this is not the most epic. Like this,
but so much of Deep Space Nine has been epic, right? I don't particularly feel like you need the finale of that series to be epic when, like, everything leading up to the finale itself was in epic, right? Yeah.
I also don't think that this ending is particularly epic.
No, it's not. It's not epic. It's not. In my mind, it's actually one of the worst Trek finales.
Yeah, I mean, one half of it, you had like the invasion of Cardassia and everything that went along with that, and then like almost seems like tacked on was the whole thing with like
the power race,
going to the
right,
fire caves and taking down Dukat. It's like it almost feels like it should have been an entirely different episode, not like after the invasion of Cardassia. Devote an entire episode to this. And figure it out.
Yep.
So, final thoughts. Like I've said through this episode, we've scratched the surface on Bajoran culture. I think we'll probably have other episodes. So, any closing thoughts on the prophets? And I think the last question is, do you think there's more stories to tell with them outside of Sisko's return?
Yeah, absolutely. Like regardless of what they are in that, they are very powerful. They have the only stable wormhole in the galaxy in that can reach the Gamma Quadrant. And it's almost no accident, that they've decided to make that their celestial temple, for whatever it's called. I like that they left them mysterious. We don't know a lot about them. There's still more to explore, and I think they probably have a lot more story to tell in that. It's like if they can interact with, well, with the lives of one set of corporeal beings in that, why not more in that? Because there really seems like there's more to tell. They really put a nail in the head, a nail in the coffin of the story of the pod race, and that they've kind of said like, this is destroying the book is like seal them away forever. They can never return.
Yeah.
But I definitely feel like there's something more to do with them that in this universe.
I'm gonna disagree with Hawk. I think that the story of the prophets is very much tied to the Sisko family and of Bajor specifically. Maybe there's some stories with Kira, and if you want to do a series just on Bajor specifically. But I think the prophets belong, like if we're talking about Star Trek, like they belong to Ben Sisko and the Sisko family. I don't know how much I'd like to see it go outside of that. As far as what you were saying about, more episodes to do with the prophets and Bajor, like it's hard, right? Because there is, like, we have just scratched the surface. We've been talking about doing an episode about Bajor, like instead of doing the prophets, we were talking about doing Best of the Bajorans, but that very just quickly became Best of the Prophets because you can't do just the Bajorans. It's like an impossible task without just talking about the prophets, because they're just organically tied into each other. So I think this was kind of like the perfect harmony of that. And I hope that you guys have enjoyed that. Yeah, I just no, I think that they're just kind of very much tied to Sisko. So no, I don't know how much more story there is without him involved.
I think somewhere in the middle. I think we could probably find something, but if we're going to bring the prophets in, there needs to be a damn good reason, unless it's interacting with Shax or Boimler, because that is a-okay. But yeah, have a really damn good reason for it, because the prophets are so OP.
Yeah,
they're so OP. Yeah. Like we have to use them very carefully, and that's why they didn't have them appear that much in Deep Space Nine. And even though they didn't appear that much, they still affected so much because they're just always there. I think that we could explore more with the Bajoran faith, which is kind of touching on the prophets. And I mean, also, talking about Star Trek Legacy, how maybe even into Lower Decks, how has the Bajoran faith changed with
great question,
Sisko gone?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That actually leads into Michael Kwan, who here's a concluding question. He writes, was it a mistake from the start of the show to make the prophets the Bajoran gods and the basis of their religion? Does that lock the story in certain directions? I'm going to immediately say no. I think that it makes Deep Space Nine I think the most unique Star Trek series to ever come out, and the stories that were told with them have all been really good. I think every single one of us at one point in our private chat has said this week that rewatching these episodes has been just like an absolute pleasure and been amazing. So no, I think this actually was a great move on the writer's part.
Yeah, agreed.
And I think that absolutely the prophets would form a religion. I'm the only reason there's not a religion around the Q is because Star Trek doesn't want to deal with religion too much. But like Lower Decks, if they had a cult of the Q, I would not be shocked at all, because these all-powerful beings, people want to believe in this kind of stuff. And I'm sorry, if you have tangible proof of it, which you did with the prophets, then yeah, people are going to form worship around that. So yeah, these episodes are so good. I think 3 of the episodes on this list, I'm like, oh my God, these are my favorite episodes of Deep Space Nine. And I didn't realize how much I was into prophet episodes, but it kind of helps that Sisko is one of my favorite characters, and Sisko's just his deepest episodes are tied to the prophets. with maybe the exception of In the Pale Moonlight, which has nothing to do with the prophets.
Like nothing to do with them.
So with that, we have our subspace to pull and mailbag.
Hailing frequencies open.
Who would like to take the poll?
I'll take it. So we asked Trek Twitter and Threads what their favorite prophet moment was from Deep Space Nine. This is what they had to say. 27% said learning linear time. 16% said disrupting the Ferengi economy. 14% said the Reckoning battle. And 43% of the polls said destroying the Dominion fleet. On Threads, somewhat similar results. 31% for linear time, 23% for the Ferengi economy, 0 for the Reckoning battle, and 46% for destroying the Dominion fleet.
And Julian, do you want to go on with Tara's mailbag?
Yes, I would. Thank you. So Tara wrote, too many plots here to come up with a normal episode-based limerick, so here's a more general attempt. Near Space Station Deep Space Nine, the wormhole prophets exist, beyond linear time. For Bajor, the Sisko seeks to be guide, without abandoning the Federation side. All hope to turn the Dominion Wars tide. I got goosebumps. Well done,
That's
Tara.
nice. I like that. Tara, you need to come up with like a collection of all of your Star Trek limericks. So Jessica wrote, "Oh, the prophets, from getting them all inside Sisko's head to attempting to completely overhaul the Ferengi Alliance via Zek. They really played a major part in steering DS9 as a show. Without the wormhole, there really would have been no show. They are a very unique, nebulous plot device to frame both the central conflicts of the show and a major aspect of the Bajoran people around. And I don't think we've seen anything of this scale attempted to be integrated into a Star Trek show since. They are one of the many reasons Deep Space Nine is my favorite, and I'm glad the pod chose to highlight them." So that's it.
Hey,
That is our deep dive into the prophets. Comment if you want Julian to take back the hosting.
You
duties.
did great. What are you talking about? I don't want it back. It's yours now. Thanks, Captain. I'm retired. I'm retiring like Ben Sisko should have after the rapture. Come on.
You've got a nice property on Bajor now.
Fucking wish I did. Goddamn.
Horses, maybe.
Horses? No,
Yes,
I don't need a horse. I'll just borrow Captain Pike's from time to time.
Yeah.
That's it for the show. Until next time, live long and prosper. Bajor, good night.
Thanks for beaming into our podcast today. If you want to keep the hailing frequencies open, you can subscribe on Apple and Google Podcasts, YouTube, and Spotify. Like what you hear? Put in a good word with Starfleet and leave us a 5-star review.